They gave me a diamond necklace as a graduation gift, and within hours, I could barely stand. What I didn't know was the clasp was laced with poison, and my own parents planned to cash in on my death. But I wasn't about to die quietly. I remember the day as if it were stitched into my memory with gold thread. My name echoed through the auditorium, carried by the applause of hundreds. I walked across the stage, heart pounding, my hands slightly trembling as I took the diploma. It felt heavier than it should, as if it held every late night, every sacrifice, every moment I'd pushed myself beyond exhaustion. In the front row, my parents were smiling wide, the kind of smile meant for photographs. For a moment, I believed it was genuine. For a moment, I believed we were a family that celebrated each other. Through my childhood, I'd built my life around trying to earn their approval. While other kids played, I was memorizing textbooks. When friends went to movies, I stayed home, writing essays under a single desk lamp. My parents rarely praised me, but when they did, even briefly, it lit something in me that kept me going. I told myself they loved me in their own way, a quiet, reserved way I just had to understand. That evening, the house looked transformed. Soft amber light from string bulbs draped over the garden, the faint sound of jazz floating through the air. Tables were covered in polished glassware and fresh flowers. Relatives I hadn't seen in years hugged me tightly, congratulating me. Friends laughed and clinked glasses in my honor. Every few minutes, my parents would glance over at me. At first, I thought it was pride. But now, remembering, there was something calculated in the way their eyes followed me, as if they were waiting for a particular moment. Near the end of the evening, my father called for everyone's attention. Conversations faded into a hush. He stood in the center of the room holding a small velvet box, his expression softened by an almost theatrical warmth. He spoke about milestones, about family traditions, about how proud they were of my achievements. My mother stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm, nodding at each word. When he opened the box, gasps filled the air. Inside, nestled on black silk, was a diamond necklace that caught the light in dozens of tiny sparks. "This," my mother said, her voice trembling in a way that drew the crowd in, "has been passed down through generations. Today, it belongs to you." I was stunned. My parents weren't the type to give sentimental gifts. I felt tears prick at the edges of my eyes. My mother stepped forward, lifting the necklace carefully. She moved behind me, her fingers brushing the back of my neck as she clasped it shut. The metal was cold against my skin, and for a split second, it felt almost too cold, but the applause and flashing phones drowned out any thought that something might be off. For the rest of the evening, the necklace seemed to command attention. Guests complimented it over and over, some even asking if it was insured. My parents beamed every time, telling the story of its supposed history. I tried to enjoy the attention, but the necklace sat heavier on my collarbone than I expected. By the time the last toast was made, a dull ache had settled in my temples. I brushed it off as fatigue. But while saying goodnight to guests, I noticed my parents standing by the door, watching me with the same fixed expressions they'd worn all evening. There was something in their eyes I couldn't name at the time. Later, in the quiet of my room, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The diamonds glittered under the lamplight, beautiful and perfect. I smiled faintly, convincing myself it was a symbol of love. I didn't know then that it was the first move in a game I didn't know I was playing, a game where losing meant dying. The next morning, the sunlight felt almost aggressive, pouring through the blinds in harsh streaks that made my head pound. My mouth was dry, my throat tight, and when I tried to sit up, the room tilted sharply to one side. My hands gripped the edges of the bed until the dizziness eased, but the weakness lingered. I reached for the glass of water on my nightstand, but even that felt heavier than it should. The necklace was still around my neck, cool and unmoving, as though it had been waiting for me to wake up. I hadn't taken it off before sleeping, I'd been too tired, too distracted by the way it seemed to shine even in the dark. Now, my skin at the back of my neck itched, and when I touched it, I found a faint rash, warm and tender to the touch. By noon, the symptoms hadn't faded. My balance was off, my vision blurred slightly whenever I moved too quickly. While making tea in the kitchen, my hand slipped. The mug shattered against the floor, sending hot liquid and ceramic shards across my bare feet. My mother appeared instantly, her voice thick with concern, telling me I was overworked and needed rest. She suggested a spa day, massages, facials, time away from all the stress. I asked if I should see a doctor, but she waved it off. "It's nothing serious, sweetheart. You're just tired." Her words didn't comfort me. Something about her tone felt rehearsed, like she'd been waiting for me to complain about feeling unwell. 2 days passed, and my condition worsened. The dizziness came in waves now, sometimes so strong I had to sit down mid-step. Bruises began appearing on my arms and legs without explanation, deep and purple against my skin. Climbing stairs left me winded, and a heaviness pressed against my chest each night as I tried to sleep. When Mia visited, I thought I could hide it, but she noticed instantly. We were hugging hello when she froze, her hand brushing the back of my neck. "What's this?" she asked, tilting her head to get a better look. I told her about the rash, about the headaches, about how it all started after I wore the necklace. She leaned in closer, sniffing near the clasp. "It smells metallic, but not like silver or gold. More chemical. I read about something like this in a forensics class once, a metal treated with a slow-release toxin." Her expression tightened. "Anna, you need to get that checked." The thought made my stomach twist, but that night, I couldn't ignore the symptoms anymore. The rash burned, the dizziness made me afraid to stand for too long, and the bruises seemed to darken by the hour. I went to the doctor the next morning without telling my parents. The waiting room felt colder than it should, my hands trembling as I filled out the forms. Blood was drawn, tests ordered. When the doctor returned, his face was calm but deliberate. "You have traces of a compound in your blood," he said carefully. "It's not something that appears naturally. It's toxic over prolonged exposure. Have you been in contact with any unusual metals or substances?" I told him about the necklace, about the rash at the contact point. He nodded slowly. "If you value your health, stop wearing it immediately. This isn't something to take lightly." Back at home, I unclasped the necklace and placed it on my desk. That's when I noticed it, a faint seam running along the underside of the clasp, almost invisible unless the light caught it just right. It wasn't just a clasp. It was a tiny compartment, sealed tightly. The confirmation came later that night. My father had gone to bed early, my mother busy in the kitchen. I slipped into his study, using the spare key I'd known about since I was a child. The desk drawers were neat, filled with files and envelopes. One of them had my name on it in black ink. Inside were freshly signed documents, a life insurance policy, taken out exactly 2 weeks before graduation. The payout was in the hundreds of thousands. My parents were the only beneficiaries. The paper trembled in my hands. Everything connected in a single, sickening moment, the necklace, the symptoms, the timing. I wasn't paranoid. I wasn't imagining things. When I confronted them, my voice shook but my words were sharp. My mother's eyes filled with tears instantly, her voice breaking as she accused me of making wild, hurtful assumptions. My father slammed his hand on the table, telling me to be careful, that accusations like this could destroy the family's reputation. But beneath the tears and anger, their eyes told the truth. And the truth was simple, they had decided my life was worth more to them dead. I didn't sleep that night. Every sound in the house seemed louder than it should be, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of the hallway floorboards, even the faint ticking of the clock. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind replaying every detail. The way my father's eyes narrowed when I confronted them. The way my mother's tears seemed ready on command. The weight of that policy in my hands, the exact date it was signed. For years, I had told myself that my parents were strict, distant, maybe flawed in their way of showing love, but love all the same. Now, I couldn't deny it any longer. They hadn't just decided I wasn't worth keeping in their lives. They'd decided I was worth more dead. Fear came first. A cold, suffocating fear that made my chest feel tight and my thoughts scatter. But fear has a short lifespan when it's fed with betrayal. By sunrise, fear had hardened into something sharper. I knew what I had to do. They couldn't know I'd found out. Not yet. If they believed I was dying, they'd keep moving toward whatever end they had planned. But if they believed they'd succeeded, they'd finally relax, and maybe, just maybe, they'd make a mistake. There was only one person I could trust with something like this. Mia didn't hesitate when I called. She arrived at my apartment in under an hour, hair still messy from sleep, coffee in hand. I told her everything, the doctor's report, the toxic clasp, the insurance papers. I even showed her the necklace in its box. Her jaw tightened as I spoke. Then we give them what they want, she said simply. I stared at her, unsure if she was serious. But she didn't look away. We make them think you're dead. If they're celebrating, if they're careless, we'll have proof. You can't just accuse people of something like this without evidence that sticks. We started with the necklace. I had it duplicated at a small jeweler's shop in a different part of the city. The fake looked identical, but the clasp was just a standard mechanism. I put it on and began my act, moving slower, speaking softer, letting exhaustion seep into my posture. Publicly, I became a shadow of myself. On social media, my once bright photos turned into short updates about feeling unwell, about being too tired to leave the house. Mia, who had a talent for subtlety, began posting as well, visiting a sick friend, hoping for better news, little breadcrumbs that made people start asking questions. In person, I let my parents see the decline. Sometimes I'd cough when they entered the room. Sometimes I'd stumble in the hallway, catching myself on the wall. I made sure they saw me avoiding food, clutching at my chest as if short of breath. They didn't push me toward a doctor this time. If anything, they seemed content to watch. The transformation took 3 weeks. I stopped wearing makeup, let my hair hang limp, dropped weight intentionally by cutting my diet. Sleep deprivation added natural dark circles under my eyes. I had to remind myself every day, the worse I looked, the more believable the plan became. When it was time, Mia and I staged the final act. She drove me to a small, out-of-town clinic she knew through her internship. The doctor there, an older man with kind eyes, listened as Mia explained the situation. Without filing an official record, he wrote a death certificate, complications due to illness. That night, Mia made the call to my parents. I sat beside her, listening to the speakerphone. My mother's voice came through first, brittle and trembling. My father's was quieter, controlled. They asked no questions about hospitals, no requests to see me one last time. Only a soft, "we understand," before hanging up. I thought that might be the end of it for the night, but 2 days earlier, Mia had hidden a small camera in their living room, disguised inside a decorative plant. It was time to see what it had caught. We watched the footage in silence. My parents sat together on the couch, still in their day clothes. My mother stared at the floor for a long moment, then let out a laugh, sharp and too quick. My father leaned back, exhaling as if shedding a heavy burden. "It's finally over," he said. "We can move on now." They poured themselves drinks. They toasted quietly. They talked about the insurance payout, about clearing debts, about how much easier life would be without the constant responsibility. At one point, my father chuckled, saying, "I'm glad we did it before she made a mess of her life. We did the right thing." Hearing it made something inside me go still. It wasn't rage, not exactly. It was the cold certainty of knowing that every move from here had to be precise. For the next few days, I stayed in hiding at Mia's apartment. She kept track of my parents' movements, meetings at the bank, appointments at the insurance office, dinners out where they laughed too loudly. They were already spending the money in their minds. And I was counting down the hours until I'd take it all away. 3 days after my death, the insurance company confirmed the payout was being processed. My parents had signed all the necessary paperwork. It was just a matter of time before the money hit their account. That was when Mia and I decided to strike. We didn't want just confrontation. We wanted exposure, undeniable, irreversible. Something that would make sure they couldn't twist the story, couldn't paint themselves as misunderstood, grieving parents. Mia helped me set the stage. We booked a private event space in a small hotel downtown, telling everyone it was a memorial gathering. Invitations went out to extended family, neighbors, and a few mutual friends. My parents would think it was just another chance to soak up sympathy. On the day of the memorial, the room was draped in white and silver. A large framed photo of me, smiling, alive, sat at the front, surrounded by flowers. There were chairs arranged in neat rows, soft music playing. My parents arrived in somber clothing, playing their roles perfectly. They shook hands, accepted condolences, even dabbed at their eyes with tissues. I was in the back room, watching everything on a monitor. My pulse was steady, almost unnervingly so. For weeks, I'd been planning this moment. Now, standing on the edge of it, I felt calm, like the last piece of a puzzle sliding into place. When everyone was seated, Mia stepped up to the microphone. She spoke about me, about my determination, my kindness, my love for life. She let her voice crack just enough to keep the room leaning in. Then she said, "There's something you all need to see." The lights dimmed. The monitor switched to footage from the hidden camera. My parents appeared on screen, sitting in their living room the night of my death. My mother's laugh rang out in the silence of the memorial hall. My father's voice followed, "It's finally over. Now we can move on." Gasps rippled through the room. The camera showed them toasting, talking about the payout, mocking the idea of me ruining my life. The air felt thick with disbelief and disgust. And then the screen went black. The lights came up. And I walked out. The collective sound of shock was almost physical. People stood. Someone dropped a glass. My parents went pale, my mother's hand clutching at her chest, my father frozen in place. I stopped in front of them, my voice clear and steady. "You thought I was gone. You thought you'd get away with it. But I wanted you to see exactly what you look like when you think no one's watching." My father opened his mouth, but no words came out. My mother shook her head, her voice breaking, "This isn't what it looks like." "It's exactly what it looks like," I said, cutting her off. "And everyone here has seen it." I turned to the crowd. "They poisoned me." The clasp on the necklace they gave me was laced with a slow-releasing toxin. "I have medical proof, I have the jewelry, I have the footage." They took out a life insurance policy worth more than my life meant to them. The room was silent except for whispers. A cousin of mine stepped forward, eyes narrowed at my parents. "Is it true?" he asked. They didn't answer. I didn't need them to. I walked to the front table, picked up the framed photo, and set it down gently. "I died for you once. It won't happen again." Police officers, whom Mia had tipped off earlier that morning, entered quietly through the side door. They approached my parents, speaking low, asking them to stand. My father tried to protest, but the officer read out their rights. My mother didn't move, her eyes still locked on me as if trying to figure out how I'd managed to survive. The crowd parted as they were led out in handcuffs. I watched them go without a shred of satisfaction, just the deep, cold certainty that it was over. In the weeks that followed, the story spread. Local news stations covered it. The footage from the memorial leaked online. People who had once admired my parents crossed the street to avoid them in court. The insurance company froze the payout, pending the criminal trial. I moved into a new apartment. I sold the fake necklace, donating the money to a fund for victims of domestic and family betrayal. The real one, with its toxic clasp, I kept locked in a small metal box. Not as a reminder of pain, but as proof of survival. Mia visited often. We'd sit on my balcony, sipping tea, watching the city lights. She'd tease me about how calm I'd been during the reveal, how I'd looked like I was in complete control. I wasn't calm, I told her once. I was done. And that's different. When you're done, you stop hoping they'll change. You stop wishing things could be different. You just end it. The trial came months later. My parents' lawyers tried to argue stress, misunderstanding, even that the footage had been taken out of context. But the toxicology report, the insurance paperwork, and the hidden camera footage left no room for doubt. The jury took less than 2 hours to deliver the verdict, guilty on all counts. I didn't attend the sentencing. I didn't need to hear how many years they'd spend behind bars. For me, the real sentence had already been handed down the moment they realized I was alive and they had lost everything. One evening, I stood in front of the mirror, holding the box with the necklace inside. I thought about the girl who had worn it with pride that night, believing it was a gift of love. That girl was gone. In her place was someone who knew exactly what she was worth, and exactly how far she would go to protect herself. And for the first time in months, I felt truly, completely free. Trust is a powerful thing, but it should never blind you to reality. Sometimes the people who smile the widest at your success are the same ones plotting behind closed doors. That doesn't mean you should live in constant fear, but it does mean you should listen to your instincts. If something feels off, a strange gift, a sudden change in behavior, or a too perfect opportunity, pause and look closer. Ask questions. Double check. The people who truly care for you will never be offended by your caution. And if betrayal does happen, remember this: revenge is not always about anger or destruction. Sometimes, the most powerful revenge is survival, living well, speaking the truth, and making sure they can never hurt you or anyone else again. Your story is yours to protect. Guard it. Protect your peace. And never, ever let anyone convince you that your worth is measured in money, possessions, or what you can give them. Because in the end, walking away alive, and stronger than before, will always be the greatest victory. Please subscribe the YouTube channel Payback Hour for more revenge stories.